All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott at Blackhawk Technical College. I left off last time, I believe, on page 126, so we are right here now, as shown in figure 426. I had a problem when I was trying to run my program, and I didn't have a chance to look at it, so I will before I put it out there, but I'm going to pick it up on the bottom of the page. The author mentions if you compare your running application to figure 4.2, you might notice an interesting difference. The Do Something button does not look like the one in the figure because beginning with iOS 7, the default button was changed, so it's got a very simple appearance. It's just plain text, no outline, no border, no background color, no decoration whatsoever. As mentioned, this conforms nicely to Apple's design guidelines for iOS 7 and later, but there still might be time when you want to do more, so they have you do more. It says many of the buttons that you see on your iOS device are drawn using images. We provided images that you can use in this example in the 04 button images folder, and I believe I have those loaded here. So it says in the project navigator, select your assets catalog and drag both images from the button folder straight into the editing area. All right, and as I said, I believe got the program up here. I believe I've done that. So if we look over here and we view our project navigator, why I always do it that way, I don't know. There are those two images, the blue button and the white button. So I've already done that. Now, if you look at the two button images just added, you'll probably be struck by the size of them. They're very small. I could double click on them, but again, you have to take my word for it for now, or do it yourselves. They are very small. That's because these graphics are meant to be stretchable. It so happens that the UI kit can stretch graphics nicely to fill basically any size you want to have filled. A stretchable image is a resizable image that knows how to stretch itself intelligently so that it maintains its correct appearance. Edge insets are the parts of an image measured in pixels that shouldn't be resized. It says there we want to bevel around the edges to stay the same no matter what size we make the button. So we need to specify how much non-stretchable space makes up each image. In the past you could only do this in code, but now starting with Xcode 6, you can do what's called visually slice an image in the assets catalog. Now, this is shown starting on the bottom of 127, and it goes on to 128, and 129, 130, okay, but the main part of it is on the bottom of 127 and 128. I'm going to try to do it. If I have any problems whatsoever doing it, I'm just going to give up, okay? And I'll try to do it at home when I've got a little bit more time. Like I said, try to. So select the images, assets, and inside that select white button. So I've now done that. It says at the bottom of the editing area you'll see a button that says show slicing. Well, I don't see it. I am going to select that, but the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here, and first I'm going to select the storyboard. Okay, so I had all that stuff like I did before. Alright, now if I select the white button, will it all go away? And the answer is, I guess, yes. It says at the bottom of the editing area, which should be down here, alright, the author says you'll see a button named Show Slicing. Still looking for it. Well, I don't see that button. So maybe it's just me. Maybe it's not here. I don't know. Oops, that's definitely not what I wanted to do. So I'm in here. Trying to do this. Again, as they mentioned there, at the bottom of the editing area, you'll see a button named Show Slicing. All right. And when I looked, I did not see a button here. That's the editing area, I would think. I don't see anything called Show Slicing. I've tried to highlight everything here. So I am going to skip all of the stuff that you see on the bottom of 127 and most of 128. Okay, and I'm going to jump down to the bottom of page 128 where the author tells us, so I apologize for that, I just don't know what else to do. The author mentions here on the bottom of the page, every iOS control has 4 possible control states. We talked a little bit about these before. Normal, which is the default state, the state that controls are in when they're not in any other type of state. Highlighted, when it's currently being used, or I guess you could say it probably has the focus. Disabled, when they've been turned off. This is mentioned on the top of the next page. And selected. It says only some controls support the selected state. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to connect, as it says, and create our button outlets and actions. They want us to control drag from the new button to the assistant editor just below the one we've already done. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I guess I can. It's really not going to matter very much. I was thinking the other day that it's possible, if you look at the code that's in here, this is code that's in your book. And they show it right here. Now, the other day when I tried, I was getting error messages in the code that I had put in for the seek bar. And I'm wondering if it's at all possible, because this is in bold. I have absolutely no idea if it means, since it's in bold, that I should just be keying it in directly, all right, as opposed to putting it in the way that I was putting it in, okay? But we'll try that in just a second. All right. So we are told to go back in here. Let's go back to the storyboard. Let's click on the button in here to make sure that what we have is the button. Do something. We no longer need this. Give us a little bit more room. We also no longer need that to give us a little bit more room. So we are told to control drag and give a new outlet for this. And we are told to call this do something button. And unfortunately it put it down a little lower than I wanted it to be put down, so okay, so there that is. And then we're told, I guess we do want some space here, to control click a second time and drag down and create an action called button pressed. So I'm going to do that as well. Again, this one will be an action rather than an outlet, and it will be button pressed, and we will set that for UI button and connect. All right. It says we also need to make our button hidden from the start. We don't want to do that. We didn't want to do that before because it would have made it harder to collect the outlets and the actions. All right, so we want to scroll down to the view section and click the hidden checkbox. So I believe that's going to be in here. Button selected. There's view. Supposed to click the hidden checkbox for the button. There we go. The button will still be visible in the interface builder, but it will look faded out and transparent to indicate its hidden status right here. All right, save the storyboard and focus once again on the viewController.swift. Look for the toggle controls method that Xcode created for us and add the following code to it. I didn't see that when I took a quick look, but let's go down and look. Switch changed, background tab. And again, I don't see it. We had switch changed, but it said, look for the toggle controls method that Xcode created for us. It did not. I think that would have been here. And maybe we were told to do this before. I don't really know. But I'm going to try doing it like this, and if I'm wrong, sure as heck wouldn't be the first time. All right, so we're going to make that an action for our segment and control. And we'll call this toggle controls. All right. And there's the associated code. The author mentions here on page 130, this code looks at the selected segment index property of the sender, which tells us which of the actions is currently selected. The first action, called switches, has an index of 0. We've noted this fact in a comment. All right now the yellow A-press icon really sticks out like a sore thumb, it says. So let's extend the yellow color to our entire view. In the main storyboard content, select the main content view. I believe I can close this, which will make this a little easier for me to see. All right, they want us to bring up the Attributes Inspector. Click the color swatch named Background. May not have done this correctly, so. I don't see anything here that says main, like they tell us to do that. So I was trying to do it like this. We want to make this whole thing, the whole thing, yellow in the background, but I don't see a place in here where I can set that. Oh boy. See what that did. Background. Guess that worked. Okay. It says now run the app and you'll see that the yellow color fills the entire screen with no visible distinction between the status bar and your app's content. Well, I'm not going to run it because every time I have, I've gotten an error message, which I'm going to have to try to go back and fix. Okay. If you've typed everything incorrectly, you should also be able to switch between the button and the pair of switches. If you tap either switch, the other one will change its value as well. The button still doesn't do anything. Before we implement it, we need to talk about action sheets and alerts, which brings us to page 131. Okay, let's switch back to here. As they mention here, action sheets and alerts are both used to provide feedback. Action sheets force the user to make a choice between two or more items, such as we saw back on page 90 on figure 4.3. Oops, that was nifty. There's the two that you had to choose from. On the other hand, alerts are a rounded rectangle that come up in the middle of the screen. So when you clicked one of those two, it brought up the associated alert, which was on page 91, right here. So that's pretty much what we're going to implement right now. Alerts are normally used to inform a user that something important or extraordinary has happened. Like action sheets, they may be presented with only a single button, although you do have the option of presenting multiple buttons, so if you wanted like a yes, no, cancel or something like that. All right, so we jump back here to page 131. And as mentioned down towards the bottom, showing an action sheet, it says let's switch over to our viewcontroller.swift and implement the button's action method. Begin by looking for the empty button pressed, and then add the code as shown here on the page. All right, so let's highlight all this. Switch back here, find our button press, so I have to bring up the assistant editor again. All right, so there's all that code. Hopefully there are no mistakes in here and I didn't miss anything. Somehow put in 3 W's. All right. Nope, there's more on the next page. So let me put that in also. Okay, now as you can see, I've got all sorts of errors. And we'll work our way through them. It looks like I had one too many curly braces in there. All right, so let me remove this. Move this over. All right, so here's our code as shown here on pages 131 and 132. The author says exactly what did we do here. First, in the do something method, we allocated and initialized a UI alert controller. Move this up a little bit. That's what we've got right here. A UI controller can display either an action sheet or an alert. The initializer takes different parameters, so if we look at them, the first parameter that's in there is the title to be displayed. Are you sure? The second parameter is the message. We're not going to have any, so we just set it to nil. Then we've got preferred style. All right. Since we need an action sheet, that's what we specify there. The alert controller does not specify any buttons by default. You have to create a UI alert object for each one of those actions. All right, so part of the code that we use to do that is shown down below here, right there. And that's the yes, I'm sure, and then, whoop, that's down here. The yes, I'm sure, and the no way are both shown here. And you'll notice if you take a look, there's quite a bit of code here. But most of the code that's here is kind of, for lack of better words, sort of aesthetic in nature, in that it's setting up the parameters that we need to make this look the way that it's shown in the book. For each one of the buttons, we specify the title, a handler to be called when the button is pressed. There's 3 possible styles: destructive, used when a button triggers a destructive or dangerous action, kind of like an error condition; alert for a normal button, which is to say that it's not destructive, so kind of like an information type of icon; and cancel, to bring up a cancel button. Finally, we come in at the end and we add the buttons right here. All right, where we're actually adding those buttons. To the controller. To make the alert or action sheet visible, we need to ask the current view controller to present the alert controller, and that's what we're doing in this if statement that you see down on the bottom here. Right there. So as mentioned here, these first 4 lines, the lines in the if statement, configure where the action sheet appears by getting the alert controller's popover presentation controller and setting its source view and source rec properties. All right. Finally, then, we make the action sheet visible, which is the line that's right here, by calling the present view controller method, passing it the alert controller as what we want to have presented. Now, they talk a little bit about popovers, starting on the bottom of 133 and going on to 134. The author mentions on the iPhone, the action sheet always pops up over the bottom of the screen, as shown in figure 4.3, but on the iPad, it's displayed as a popover, a small rounded rectangle with an arrow that points toward another view. And you can see that in figure 428. That's on the top of page 134. So let me bring that up. And that's it right here. And they mentioned down towards the bottom of the page, as you can see, the popover's arrow points to the do something button. That's because of the way that we set it up in the code. All right. Also notice that back in the code, and they show this down on the bottom of the page here too, so hopefully I can bring that up, but maybe not. So the code that you can see here down towards the bottom of page 134, the author says, down on the bottom of the page here, it says in figure 428, the popover appears below the source button, but you can change this if you need to by setting the popover presentation, which has got a bunch of different possibilities for you. So in the code they show here, and that's bolded on the bottom of page 134, it says it moves the popover button by setting the popover direction, arrow direction to down. All right. They also mention here on the top of the next page, on page 135, the author says if you compare 428 and 443, you'll see that the no way button is missing on the iPad. The alert controller does not use buttons for this on the iPad because users are accustomed to dismissing a popover without taking any action. All right. Then finally, the last thing that's discussed in the chapter here, starting in the middle of page 135, is the alert. And it's mentioned here, when the user presses the Yes, I'm Sure button, you want it to come back with the associated alert. When the button was added to the alert controller, when that one is pressed, the action sheet is dismissed and the button handler block comes through. And the code that's executed when the Yes, I'm Sure button, all right, basically that's the stuff that fires. All right, so there's the yes. There is empty. All right. So it says the first thing we do in the handler block is to create a new string that will be displayed to the user. In a real application, it'd probably be different. It would be whatever you wanted to have happen. All right. And finally, as mentioned here on 136, the author says you can see the alert that's created in this code in figure 4.4. That was back on around page 91 or so. So when we click the yes, you can breathe easy, everything went okay. All right, so that was the end of this chapter. It was the longest chapter I believe we've gone through thus far. And in the next chapter, we're going to look at what happens when the user rotates an iOS device from portrait to landscape or vice versa. See you then.